welcome to a conversation about a topic that I think is very hot right now, investing in women artists, but is not given the consideration that I hope that we'll be able to give it to today. I think that when there is a interest in a group of artists, especially one that is undervalued the way that women artists are, there can be an attraction from speculators, from flippers, from people who are interested in the potential for making money for themselves and not necessarily the long-term interest of the artist's career. And so we're here to talk about the sustainable way of investing in women artists from two women who are committed to that and have really interesting financial backgrounds. So I would love to start with your backgrounds, what you bring to this conversation, and then we can sort of kick it off. So if you could start, maybe Maryana, talk about where you came from. You came from an unusual place, and yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm very comfortable here with Cornelia next to me. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to the talk. But second, about myself, so I was in finance for 13 years, and eventually I quit and decided to open a gallery, which on the border of craziness, stupidity, and something in between. But I'm obsessed with art and I love it. So my last position in corporate world was in a tech company. I was crafting deals across North and Latin America. So some sort of biz dev meets finance for very old-fashioned telecommunication industry. And I was very much surrounded by men all the time, very old-fashioned industry. So when I switched to arts, it was very natural for me to work mainly with women, and this is what we show at the gallery, which are so far 100% women artists.
Amazing.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Rebecca Fine. I am third generation matrilineally in the art world. My great aunt was the first female gallery owner in New York City in 1930. Rose Freed started the Pinacoteca Gallery, and she introduced to the American public, I would say market, but then it was really more of an art world than an art market. But she brought artists like Duchamp and Klee, Kandinsky, Malevich, Schwitters, Sonia Robert Delaunay, and gave Alice Neal her first solo exhibition. But she was not wonderful with women artists, and famously told Carmen Herrera she would sort of never amount to anything because it was a man's world, and had, I think, a very complex and probably ambivalent relationship to female artists. My mom grew up working in her gallery. My mother is a sculptor who at 85 is still sculpting. My sister's an abstract painter who was showed with Mariana's gallery. My brother's a figure painter, the other one's a filmmaker, and I didn't have a modicum of the talent that everyone else did, so I naturally went to law school. I was actually planning to study art history, to do a PhD, and ended up in law school sort of on a lark, not knowing what would make of it. And at the time, there was no real art law practice. So for many years, I was studying, I was really working as a lawyer at big law, securities and antitrust litigation. But only found my way back into the art space as an art lawyer at a boutique where I grew an art law practice. And I was focused on many of the qualities of art that make it very difficult to use it as loan collateral, namely authenticity, attribution, valuation, etc. So 2015, 10 years ago, I started a company called Athena Art Finance, which is a independent specialty finance company that lends against art exclusively, paintings and sculptures at very high value. And I have an all-women finance team, which is important to me. And I think lends to is sort of our secret sauce. I have a very strong interest in supporting female artists, given my background, and I'm always really interested to speak to audiences who are really sort of just getting their toes wet and are interested, even those of you who are sort of looking at art as an asset class, because I think there's a really elegant path way to collecting art. Yeah,
and that's such a perfect segue into my first question, and basically what this talk is about, which is how do you sustainably invest in women artists? I think a lot of people, buying a piece of art is a significant investment. Even a $10,000 painting, if you're only in it for the investment, can feel like quite a risk. So how do we make sure, and I know Maryana, you have thoughts on this, how do we make sure that any investment in women artists is an investment, it can be for financial reasons, but is also for the right reasons, for love, for interest in sustaining a career? How do we make sure that investing in women isn't about making a quick buck?
I'll go first because I have a shorter answer. As a gallerist or as a dealer, I think the first, our role is also to protect the artist. So we definitely have some sort of a clause in our terms and conditions when people acquire the artwork that we have the first right to buy in the course of 5 years, which protects the artist from being flipped, meaning that the person who acquires the art will not sell it after 2 years, or if they do, they will first offer the gallery to buy it back, and we definitely will. I think it goes to actually both. So in this for this question, I think that there is men and women alike, right? So galleries are trying to protect artists, so they won't be flipped, so the prices will be sustainable, because being in the auction is actually a huge danger for them. To both ways, by the way. Either and correct me if I'm wrong, but either if they're successful or not. Just two scenarios. Can I? Yeah. Two scenarios. So let's say the artist didn't do well. In this case, the prices are going down, and it kind of ruins their market. But if they did do well, and the prices skyrocketed, and something that was acquired for 10,000 now is 200,000, which is not representative of the market, it might be that the artist will stay several years without acquisitions, because he kind of lost all the collectors of the same tier that can afford to buy his work. So we definitely do have this clause in our terms, and I know that in Athena you guys play by the rule of the market.
Yeah, I mean, Athena is probably not the exactly right place to start, because our borrowers tend to be collectors who have very, very valuable collections already. But I think it's important to speak to the newer collector audience, and I know we have disagreed on this point, but I think one of the really wonderful things about collecting as a young collector or beginning is the fact that in the primary market, when you have access to the dealer directly or the gallerist, that very often, and I would say most often, if you attend an artist's opening, you will meet the artist, and you have at that point a really unique opportunity to experience what it is to really support an artist's career and watch their career trajectory from an insider's perspective. And I know that Maryana is rightfully very protective of her artist's time, because this is not an invitation to just, invite yourself to their studio. But if and to the extent that artists are receptive to this, I think that one of the really exciting parts of entering into the market at a lower price point is that you have the opportunity to really engage with an artist and learn about their practice and learn about other artists through them. A lot of times for me, the best art advisors are the artists themselves, who tend to really recognize talent in other artists. Right. And I think that this is a really wonderful space to do that. So leaving them sort of the prospect of really massive appreciation aside, there are lots of ways that supporting artists, in particular female artists, will pay dividends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's, knowing the artist is wonderful to have a relationship with a creative person who sees the world differently, but it's also a way to really understand, and this is very much my perspective as someone who sort of preaches matronage, which is a way of approaching, an approach to collecting with care, and it's an artist-first approach that is very dedicated to what artists need. So when you do know an artist, you know their story and you know the ways you can intervene in their lives. Like I know your sister was a art teacher for many, many years, actually at my high school or my elementary school, which is great. And so knowing your sister and your sister's story and know that she's breaking into the world of fine art. At this juncture in her life, there's a very different set of needs for those artists than it is for, a 22-year-old just graduated from college. So I think that kind of authentic support really comes from knowing the artist, even knowing this artist needs pro bono law services, and I can offer that in exchange for a painting or whatever it happens to be.
Right, and then you find a gallerist who has a mission like Maryana, where they're really making a very concerted effort to identify artists who share either an artistic vision or certain worldviews. That in and of itself is a way to curate, to begin to curate your own kind of collection. Because if you trust and like the gallerist's eye, you're more likely to to appreciate the full kind of roster of artists in there. Yeah,
and it brings me to the question, Maryana, I know you have this very interesting, we're talking about collecting finance, the financial aspects of investing in women artists. So I know you have a lot of interesting analogies about what a gallery like yours is, what is an emerging artist, maybe sort of a seed stage company. Talk about those sort of metaphors and how they do explain the world of art collecting, and then also fall short in some other ways.
Okay, yeah. So because I'm a little finance bro, I kind of developed this language to talk with my peers. So naturally, because I come from the financial industry and from the tech industry, I have a lot of young collectors who come into the gallery and they're unsure. This is probably their first acquisition. They're unsure what is the role of the gallery, why at all do we take commission. So I kind of managed somehow to translate it to their language. So when I'm asked what is the role of the gallery, I typically say we act as either an incubator or as an angel investor, which basically means that we believe in artists so badly that I'm willing to invest my time and equity towards this artist to show them again and again. Or we actually represent the artist, and in that case, we will become an incubator, meaning that not only we invest in them, but we also offer them an opportunity to meet residencies or to introduce them to other curators or to make sure that they show somewhere, not just in New York, but maybe in LA or maybe overseas. So we definitely do nurture this kind of connections between the artist and other art universe, but also it's really representing artists is a lot of responsibility. It's really like a career management, right? So definitely I feel like being calling a gallery an incubator kind of translates it to this tech or finance industry and makes it more clear.
Right. And do you feel like that helps from even a law perspective, a finance perspective?
I mean, you can, if you think about it that way, you talk about sort of small cap, mid cap companies, kind of blue chip. So when on the art finance side, more often than not, the artists whose work represents collateral for a loan are in the blue chip category. That means they have to have an established auction record, typically 10 years of auction records. And for those of you who know, primary market is the gallery that represents the artist, the living artist or the estate. You have the secondary market. Once it's traded the first time, you're in the secondary market. And among other ways that artworks sell in the secondary market, you have private sales, galleries or auction houses, and then you have public sales, which are the auctions. The only real visibility that we have I have a proprietary data analytics platform, so I have certain private market data that the public doesn't have, but overwhelmingly the index is really the public market, which is really only 50% of the trades. If you think about the sort of the emerging market, that's sort of your small cap companies, and then when they start to be in the galleries, whose names you recognize, that goes into the world, really that you're sort of in the blue chip stage. But there's also there are certain tiers among the galleries as well.
Right.
And artists typically will move. Some of them will be very loyal and have wonderful relationships with their first galleries, but very often they, after their market has achieved a certain level of success, they'll end up being represented by other other galleries.
And I guess this terminology came into the space when I was started to answering the question why it's actually important to buy from the gallery, or like what is your role, why I can just like go in and acquire from the artist directly, which you of course you can.
When you hear that something's a 50% commission, you're like, oh, I can get it for 50% off. And it's like, wait, no.
Yes, exactly. And it's very important to understand that, like, as an incubator, right, like we do reinvest towards the artistic, towards the career of the artist. So we definitely show them more. We think about how to promote them again and again, bring them to the fair, etc. So this is kind of what triggered that terminology that I think is very accessible to even people who know very little about tech or not from that industry.
And I think to continue the metaphor, there is very much, if you are, an angel investor or whatever it is in the work of, an angel investor in a company versus if you're investing in the work of an artist, if you had a 20% stake in some company, you would of course introduce the founder to someone who could help them. You of course connect them with the resources that they need. So I think being like a real steward, patron, or in our case matron, is to yes, buy work, but also dedicate yourself to creating value for that artist. I know people who, whenever they acquire work, they hang it on their walls and they have like a party for the work. And they have the artist and they invite all their friends and the artist is there to talk about her work. And that's, that's a way to spread the word. That's a way to, I think some people sort of think, art investing, that means I buy a work, I put it in storage, and in 20 years it'll be worth more. It's like, well, what's the point in that? That's the joy isn't there, the relationship isn't there.
Right. But do treat it as an investment. That is to say, make sure that you have the proper documentation, the acquisition. The paperwork is important. Your proof of payment is important, believe it or not. So do keep a record of your proof of payment in a folder with the provenance and obviously the exhibition history is important. So if you have an opportunity to loan the work back to the gallerist or to another, to a museum, if there's an opportunity, speak to your gallerist, let them know that you're open to that, because the artist really does lose kind of track and control of those works after the first point of sale. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to loan the work to a museum for an important exhibition. It enhances the value and therefore the future saleability of the work for it to be included in an exhibition. It obviously helps that the artist is included in museum exhibitions regardless, but it's even better if your artwork is part of one of those exhibitions.
Absolutely.
So think about that as you're acquiring work, and make sure to stay in touch with the gallery to understand the extent to which there are exhibition opportunities. So treat it as an asset as well. You would never lose your title to your home or your car, so you should treat it with the same care and make sure that it's also insured properly. When the artist market changes, you can obtain an appraisal. We can talk about that later, but you can obtain an appraisal from a certified appraisal. I mean, these are just some things to think about if you're kind of collecting in a serious way.
And those are all topics we cover in the Matrons of the Arts membership. So
Okay, good.
yeah, we have an appraisal, session. We have an art insurance session. All the like completely unsexy stuff that's so important for artist legacy and for your collection's value.
Yes.
But sorry, I know you were going to say something.
No, actually, I was just thinking about the museum, and it definitely does add value for that specific work that is on the loan to a museum. Besides that, it actually helps to, if like in 10 years you will choose to resell the work, it definitely helps because the museum typically creates a catalog, so it's very well captured that this is your work, and it's. From personal experience, it's incredibly nice ego boost to see your name on the wall as a collector.
Right.
And they'll typically invite you to a museum opening if you're a lender, because all of a sudden you become a lender to the museum. You're invited to the openings, participating more organically in the artist's life means being part of those celebrations too.
Right.
And that's a fun way to think about your relationship to the artist. And really, especially at this stage, it's really meaningful. Like the artists remember everybody who buys their work.
Right.
Yes.
Where's Michelle? I'm looking at her. Like literally, they want to see their work in people's homes. They look at Instagram to see that it's hanging on someone's walls. It is very, very meaningful to them. And and that is not something that you generally experience when you buy a car or jewelry or anything else that we spend money on. You're not going to have that excitement when you see your bag on someone's arm. So a lot of non-quantifiable dividends that art, participating in the art market and art ownership can bring you.
Right, and that's where some of the finance metaphors kind of fall short, because there is that, Michelle always says the ROI is like the self-care. It's the, feeling you get when you wake up in the morning.
It's like people, like you should experience joy. You should be buying artwork that you want to look at every day, and ideally artwork that means something different to you every day and that you can discover. An experience. Yeah.
And then work also that is, investing in a world that you want to see. I always talk about, being a matron of the arts, being, matronage is about, collecting women isn't charitable. It's impact investing. It's in the same way that you invest in wind or solar energy or companies that are dedicated to social justice. You're investing in a world that celebrates female creativity.
Yes. I actually enjoy asking my collectors or even museum trustees, how do they track the percentage of minorities in their collection in general, but also what is the percentage of women artists in their collection. And I was pleased to discover that a lot of very serious collectors do keep track. So they actually can answer me, yes, I have 45% of my collection are actually women. And it's very meaningful for me to hear that, because it's incredibly uplifting to understand that what I'm doing has an impact.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're an investor and started, a few years ago, even now, I think the greatest opportunities to invest at a higher level, the greatest return will come from these women who have fantastic artists who are marginalized and relegated to the margins of art history. They were equally talented, more talented than the men, their partners, their husbands. If you follow the museum shows now, you'll see a huge amount of art historical, archival material and art historical scholarship has focused on the really this sort of underserved segment of the market, and they are now finally starting to be appreciated. I highly recommend that you guys go to the auction houses this weekend. They're free. They're basically free museums. You can get as close as this to the art. There are no red velvet ropes. You can go to see all of the works that will go back into private collections within a week. And there are a huge number of women and some amazing Frankenthalers and Joan Mitchells and Louise Nevelson and I mean, I can go on. I mean,
works that are still
Elizabeth
undervalued.
Payton.
Honestly.
Oh yeah, no,
Yes.
absolutely. There's some really wonderful works on display right now at all of the large auction houses, and many of them are women.
Yeah, and if you think about, I mean, still, when I say still undervalued, I mean the auction records for women are about 1/10 of that for men. So you have the auction record for a living woman artist is Jenny Savile's Propped, which went for I think $12 million versus Jeff Koons' Rabbit, which went for 90. You have Georgia O'Keeffe's Jimson Weed, which was sold back in like 2012, 2014, and it went for 44 million. 44 million versus the Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci, putting that in quotes. Yeah, whatever that means. $450 million. I mean, those are numbers that are literally a tenth. So the idea, we are constantly hearing that there's, Joan Mitchell set another auction record for her work, or Ruth Asawa, or Julie Moretu. Like, those are such exciting things to see, but there's still a far cry from the potential.
There's way more opportunity.
And those are the ones we know. I mean,
Yes.
art history, if you read between the lines of art history, if you look at the parentheses, if you look at the footnotes, there's always a woman artist there, The artists are always married to somebody who's equally talented, who's not getting the attention. So it's a really actually exciting thing because it's discovery. It's like all those neurons that, the human brain loves, being able, like buried treasure almost. I don't know, I think it's a really exciting time, and to be able to participate in it as a collector is even more exciting.
Yeah, you've written books, I believe, about this. And tell us about, you have a book that you just wrote.
My favorite one is Whitney Chadwick's Art, Women, and Society.
Sahonig Fine has been writing about women artists for 35 or 40 years, and her scholarship is now being reappraised, and her work is really strong, and she's been writing about female artists for 40, 50 years now.
Yeah, no, incredible. I mean, co-founded the Women Art Journal, which is a scholarly publication.
Can you maybe speak a little bit about specifically Less Than Half and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So Less Than Half, brought you the Matronage Salon is a membership group dedicated to raising the profile of women artists by teaching women how to navigate the art world as collectors, supporters, and investors in the work of women artists. So the idea is to equip women with the skills, the know-how, the tools to be able to navigate with confidence. In that confidence, in that stance, to be able to reach out and intelligently and effectively support women artists. So matronage is really the philosophy that is the centerpiece of it, and it essentially understands that the world that exists, that has gotten us to these, auction records, is one that just doesn't serve women artists. It's one that ignores women artists when they have children, or doesn't create the support that women can, for women to be able to participate in the art world when they have children. It's an art world that represents women when they're in their 90s, or gives them their first museum retrospective. It's a system that doesn't work for women. So matronage and matrons of the arts approach their collecting with a very intentional sort of revisionist way of collecting. So they offer their support wherever it's needed. That's what Less Than Half is. And we do that through monthly webinars with our oral professionals to talk about these things, appraisals and taxes and insurance and all those things. And then of course we have a bunch of fun parties like the one we had at Mariana's gallery.
Yes.
Always galleries that represent 50% or more women artists, and always when they're showing women artists. So we get them, 3 weeks ago we had a mixer at your gallery, and you were showing the work of, tell me her name again.
Fanny Ali. Yes,
I think it was the sculptor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary Kate Meyer. We have so many events that I lost track.
Yeah.
But yes, we have now on view a beautiful artist that her name is Mary Kate Meyer, and she actually uses her own photography of the voids. She photographs empty spaces, and she uses it as a baseline for her sculptures and collages. And it's a very interesting work because she prints them on metal, so on aluminum or faux leather, and collages and sculptures them, and they're just breathtaking. So yes, that's interesting. I was thinking about how did we get to this entire idea of just showing women artists after yesterday's panel, and it's actually very interesting because we don't go and support women because we think, oh, this is trendy now, it really resonates with. So I think what you're doing is incredibly meaningful.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's really an ecosystem. These things don't exist. And actually, we have a little map that anyone can take, which shows the less than half approved galleries in the Chelsea area, and it is galleries, 50% women artists showing the work of women artists currently. So if anyone has extra time on their rainy Friday and wants to traipse through Chelsea, you're very welcome to follow the map. There's some great artists on there. One of my favorites is Jordan Ann Craig, who's at Hales Gallery right now. Is an indigenous artist, Cheyenne, who makes these incredible abstractions that are based on textiles, indigenous textiles. So if you have the energy to go a couple blocks, I recommend that. Yeah.
Questions? Do you want to open to questions?
Sure. I mean, we're very happy to open to questions.
So the people who set the prices, I understand it's in response to the market. I was just wondering if you could kind of reiterate from each of your perspectives what it would take to make them set it at a higher price. I know it's a very simplistic question, but I was curious.
So I guess different markets act differently, right? Primary market it's one approach, and secondary market is pretty much set by the auction records. Primary market as a dealer, it's kind of what I'm supposed to do, and it's really based on the success of the artist. So of course, if we have a sold out show and we have a high demand for the artist and very low supply, the prices are going up. And that's pretty much it. And from my experience working with women artists, which makes them a bargain, is because women artists upfront price their artwork relatively low. And I always have this fight and ask them to increase it because I think that it's just worth way more.
So would it take, like you said, in the primary market, setting it higher so that it goes into the secondary market, and they're looking at the auction numbers, the numbers already higher?
So if you want to...
Somewhat. I mean, the auction markets are sort of fickle. It's very difficult to predict exactly. I spoke when we opened about the fact that they have ROFRs, right of first refusal, if an artwork is selling. One of the things you should look at in their contracts is whether there's typically there might be a resale restriction in the contract, and this is done very, very deliberately to protect the artist market.
Yes.
You should read the contract to see whether that is there or not. But it's more of an art than a science, really, right? Setting exactly what those levels are to achieve the best kind of result in the resale market. But generally speaking, it's demand driven, and they kind of have a feel if everything sells out right away. It's wonderful, but then you know that you probably mispriced things. It probably means that the next show you have to increase.
Correct.
Yes. I think unfortunately there isn't an exact science. Yeah. To it, yeah.
I know the artist Michelle Pred, who makes these purses with emblazoned with feminist statements and lights, and she's out in San Francisco, and she is all about fair payment and getting women a fair price for their work, and a lot of data that she's gathered about the pricing for women artists and how they do tend to underprice themselves or are underpriced. So she has created this pledge where you basically add a 15% sort of tax on top of any woman artist, assuming that she has had her work undervalued.
They're like fabulous bags too. They're art pieces, and they light up, and you like put them down at your table, and absolutely everybody will stop.
Yeah.
So I was at Expo Chicago, and she was there with bags, and there's such great like discussion pieces.
Right.
And art ideally should do that. They're like they always have sort of a provocative title. They're beautiful too, but they have like wiring inside because they literally light up. She's great. Yeah.
No, she's got a bunch of other stuff. I mean, she does projections on the sides of buildings to demand that the ERA gets passed. A bunch of stuff like that. A great feminist artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Rebecca.
Okay.
My question is, so I read in the UBS Art Basel report, it may have been the last one, but I'm sure this has been reiterated, that ultra high net worth collectors have about 50% women artists in their collections, or their acquisitions are 50% women artists.
Yeah.
So I wonder, when it comes to your work in lending against collections, have you noticed that there's a different makeup of?
Yeah, I mean, there's no
ultra-high net
like
worth
premium
collections?
that people are paying at this point in our experience for women artists, but there are very discerning collectors who have been in this market for more than a minute, who acquired female artists 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and those artworks have appreciated massively in value. So what we often find, because we get the acquisition information when we're lending against it, we see what the purchase price was. So we very much see what the trajectories are. And for many of them, the greatest kind of appreciation and value is with women artists.
Well, the current Art Basel report, which came out just a few weeks ago, was saying that galleries that sell female artists they tend to do better.
Yeah.
Which is good news for you.
Yes.
And that galleries that have women very well represented in their rosters are somehow are doing better. Why that is, I don't think the data could really say, but it does at least exemplify some sort of ethos. So. Yeah, thank you for answering that question.
Of course.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, Alex. It's a dog.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe a slightly technical question, but where do you place like options that are for benefits?
Oh, interesting.
Within this like continuum.
Okay.
How does that affect
That's so interesting.
of the artwork?
I think that we don't even track it.
Yes.
I don't think it's not part of our data set now. It's a super interesting question. I will say that on the margins, those auction records, they're just not as high value typically, so it wouldn't be something that we're tracking very closely. Keep in mind, it's a very different, they're very imbalanced because on the one hand, people are making a charitable donation to a cause typically, so they may actually be inclined to overpay. But likewise, it might be a very shallow bidder pool. We all have 2 or 3 people bidding on something, so it's not necessarily representative of the market. The concept with an auction is that that's the price that a willing buyer will pay.
Right.
So the idea is if it's public enough and everybody has an opportunity to bid, that's sort of the price, for lack of a better concept. That's not true at a private auction because there's a self-selected group that's attending and they may not be bidding on art. So it's a good question. Right. But that is a nice way to acquire art because you're doing so many nice things at the same moment.
All at the same time.
And I will say the artists feel, my siblings often donate art to a cause, and it's a wonderful kind of ecosystem because the charity gets the benefit of the money, the artist ends up in a good collection, and everybody's sort of, so do bid on, if you have the opportunity, that's a good way to buy art.
Right.
Like at least if you're just getting your toes wet.
Typically, it's we do a lot of charitable actions through the gallery that would support many different organizations, and typically it is actually a bargain because if the starting point is typically lower than the market to allow different bidders to acquire the artwork, because they basically don't, it's just not representative of the market of that specific artist. As an example, there is now charitable auction for the Queen's Museum, and Tariq Oshifiro, who is an Ethiopian artist. I'm sorry, I'm bringing up a man. I'm just familiar with his prices.
They exist. We can acknowledge they exist.
But his small artworks, they go for, I don't know, valued around 7,000, but you can buy it now for 3. So it's actually a good cause and a very well priced.
And it doesn't really affect that.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. It's not considered secondary market at all, because you actually buy it for yourself and you do not resell it forward. So it goes, and typically you can also see who is the seller. So it's usually the courtesy of the artist and the gallery, or just the artist.
I mean, you can resell it later. I mean, but you
Yes.
probably want to find the best way often to resell is to find the dealer who knows the collector base. You know, if Maryana's shown the work of the artist, then you would go find Maryana and ask her to sell it for you, probably, because she would know who the collectors are for that particular market if they're not well known yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a good question.
Go ahead.
So the relationship to the gallerist is just as important
Oh,
as
yeah.
choosing the art itself. I read the same report in
Absolutely.
the most recent Boston report, and emerging and mid-career artists are where people are seeing the least impact to the art world. But knowing about an artist that maybe you resonate with is only because of your relationship to the
Right.
gallerist.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's absolutely right.
Yes. We typically I personally don't know a lot of galleries who refuse to buy the work back and resell it to their base of collectors. More than that, if there is a case that the artwork does go to a public auction, we will be the first to bid.
So it's a continuation of that angel investor sort of.
Yes. Yes.
And artists are using Instagram. I mean, most artists, even the most sort of high-profile artists, are very often on Instagram. So if you want to get a feel for like who's collecting their work and the general, market for that artist, you can learn a lot from just looking at their Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the internet's an amazing place, and you can also find a lot of great artists to buy from who don't have gallery representation. But yeah. Yeah.
So for artists that might be maybe working more ephemerally or performance
Yeah.
based, like that might not ever have representation from a gallerist, but might be impactful in the art world in general, or museum shows. How do you?
It's a really good question.
What happens?
Like Anna Mandieta, who is all of a sudden everywhere. Like, I mean, she's always been an important artist. Anna Mandieta has always been a really avant-garde artist. But her work, much of it is ephemeral. I can think of a number of female artists who fall into this category.
But yeah, performance art is sort of, in some ways, it was invented by women.
Yeah,
Like it's a sort
for
of
sure.
very tied to the feminist art movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Marina
it's-
Abramovich being great.
Very often it's tough. I mean, you end up buying like a photograph of an installation or something like that. Conceptual art is the same. It's tricky. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's what we've got today. Thank you so much for coming. For clearly showing your support for investing in women artists, and we're here for any questions you've got.
Thank you.